with that, I believe our casters are ready for us to go ahead and hop right into this class.
Absolutely, and this is bound to be an absolutely spectacular one. Both BeanSoldier and SunseedJess being absolutely dominant players in this metagame. Looks like SunseedJess is going to start us off with the Funny Bunny, the Astrabbit, trying to look at the top 3 of her deck, see if she wants, like, which one of those she wants to take to the hand. And as we've kind of come to see, that Astrabbit in the first turn is just such an absolutely dominant play out of basically any deck. Astrabbit just being one of those go-to cards.
Yeah, it's hard to complain if you opened up Astrabbit defense going first pass. Now, it would be great to see some back row as this Astrabbit is completely wide open to the Eddy, which will swap that Astrabbit to attack position, and BeanSoldier is going to go ahead and set a back row and swing over that Astrabbit path.
Yeah, that Eddy is absolutely devastating into a no back row Astrabbit. You have to imagine that, I will say that with our previous feature match, Jess did have a little bit of a difficult time trying to find those back row pieces, but looks like she's going to try again, getting Astrabbit number 2 here. Going to get another crack at the top 3 of her deck, see if there's anything that she might want to find to help kind of iron out the any kind of a hand issue that might have popped up.
Yeah, the thing that really makes Astrabbit good is it's replacing itself in hand with another card. A thing that we've seen, a theme we've seen with decks on feature match today. Cryoblast takes out this Eddy, which is absolutely massive. A theme has been decks that are unable to continue to generate card advantage as they play can tend to really struggle as they fall behind with hand and board position. But speaking of board position,
yeah, there's
going to cast out this Foamy in defense position, which is going to get
immediately
PTA'd.
Very notably, just paying off those frosts with the PTA there, that makes it to where she has now put 3 frost in her discard. We saw previously that she is in fact on the Cryoling and Cryovern line. So sure, like, this is definitely putting her into a position where those can come down and actually be absolutely dominant. But opting to re-enchant the Astrabbit rather than develop any new Elestrals into the board. Once again, this is the 3rd trigger of Astrabbit this game. And you have to imagine that Jess is, even though Jess really hasn't shown too much back row in that regard, you have to imagine she's in a pretty good spot overall from all those Astrabbit triggers.
Yeah, and even if she's not seeing back row, like, it's possible she's just holding it because she wants to lull BeanSoldier into a certain sense of security. But even if she's not seeing back row, she's sculpting her hand in such a way through all these Astrabbit effects that she has exactly what she needs for probably the next 4 turns at least. So she's basically set up her plays from here on out to make sure that she maintains good board presence. The question is if she's going to swap this Astrabbit to attack position or not.
I will say that should definitely be in consideration as an option here. Going offensive rabbit is absolutely powerful. And there you go. The rabbit's going into attack as she sets a back row and attempts to swing in. BeanSoldier going to take 2 off of this bunny. And it's not really something you want to shield, because then the rabbit just goes back to hand and it'll get to trigger again the following turn. It's one of those cards you do not really want to have to waste something on, but sometimes it just poses too much of a threat.
Yeah, and Lavalith was something that I fully was expecting here, and now SunseedJess has to have a Tsunami, otherwise this rabbit is going bye-bye. That's the only option here, as Lavalith will come down, target that back row, and surely this is something that she has considered. However, it might be that she's not running Tsunami at all in this deck. As we saw in our tournament card representation numbers, a lot of people have been cutting Tsunami because of the dominance of water. And so it may be this is just like a Shield of Achilles that gets outed. Considering how much she's thinking about it, it may be a poison-tipped arrow. Now, that would be very expensive for her here, as it would cost her 3 spirits to out this Lavalith, but it could be pretty meaningful. She's thinking very hard about it. Very, very hard.
It could also be the Gorgon's Gaze here to help prevent the Astrabbit from getting run over for the turn. Though, granted, the fact that she hasn't just shotgunned this tells us it's not Tsunami. And it looks like it was, in fact, the poison-tipped arrow. So you were correct there. Lavalith, though, is going to just be able to walk over the rabbit, just opting to not trigger the PTA on that Lavalith cast.
very interesting decision here.
Oh,
And that
that's
makes sense.
probably
She has
why.
the Laurels in hand to go ahead and take out this Lavalith here. So she certainly does not feel bad about that series of events.
Absolutely not. And I believe sitting at 4 Frost in discard right now. She's trying to get that Cryoling online, but here comes down the Narpoon. I imagine to either search for the Cryoling or maybe for some other Frost tech out of her deck here. Just the Narpoon being an absolutely amazing tempo card. Kind of like how we said already with the Rabbit. And there is the Cryoling she's going to grab up to hand here. About 1 spirit off of being live for that quick and easy ascension up into Cryovern. But even without the Cryovern, Cryoling at this stage can come down as a 5 attacker, and that cannot be scoffed at.
Yeah, that is something that very much gets slept on with the Cryoling. Something that people don't consider if they Gorgon's Gaze the Ascension is that Cryoling still gains the attack on the opponent's turn. It can't ascend, but that is a very large and hard to deal with Elestral. But BeanSoldier not too worried about it. Gonna go ahead and play an Ashram Defense here, digging through the deck to try and find those potential outs to the now inevitable Cryovern. There's a lot of things that can do it. The question is he finding them in these top 3 cards of his deck? He's looking back and forth between his hand and the top 3. It looks like he's finally made a decision of what he wants to keep, add to his hand, and shuffle the remaining 2 back into the deck.
Yeah, you have to imagine that this Rabbit had to have grabbed something at least substantial enough to deal with the Cryoling to Cryovern line. Although, even though Jess still does not have it online as of right now, as she, again, is only on 4 Frost Spirits in the discard, it still is an inevitable threat that's going to come down here. And you would imagine that that would probably be the desired option to go over this Rabbit. With the 5 defense, it is kind of hard to out otherwise.
Yeah, this is a very interesting board state from Jess. While she may only have 4 in Underworld right now, we do know that Jess is playing Blizzard, so she very well could snipe a back row here, get 2 in Underworld, and then go Cryoling.
I'd also imagine... Oh, there's the Frostmite! That is, in fact, an answer to the Rabbit here. Going to be able to drop Rabbit's defense to 0, which means that she would have 2 different Elestrals that could walk over it here. But the Gorgon's Gaze coming out of BeanSoldier will absolutely answer that right away. But it does also mean, though, that if this Frostmite goes down in any way, shape, or form, Cryovern is accessible.
Yeah, and looks like Jess may have just passed from there, and so now this Rabbit, I believe Frostmite's only, is it a 1 attacker?
It is a 3 attacker.
3? This Rabbit can't deal with it.
Yeah, this Rabbit can't deal with it, and it's also once per turn, very notably. So if it sticks around, the Rabbit actually will have to deal with it later. But down comes the Mustache, and it is immediately going to expend to swap its stats to that of a 6/1. And I imagine it's going to have to consider walking over the Frostmite. But also, again, that means that BeanSoldier has to have something in the back row there to deal with the Cryoling coming down here. Because Cryoling is now a very viable threat, and down it comes indeed.
Yeah, you're looking to see from BeanSoldier here something like probably a Shield of Achilles. I don't believe he used the Molestation effect here, and so it is currently sitting at a 1/6 as well.
That's correct.
There's a lot that potentially you are concerned about here. Molestation is, even if Cryovern is handled, the Narpoon will handle the Molestation here, so those 2 back row have to be something like Shield of Achilles into maybe a Gorgon's Gaze or something like that. And we will see the Shield of Achilles come out.
I was also thinking, though, that with SunseedJess putting the Water Spirit under the Cryovern, it definitely, while yes, it plays around the Tsunami line, it does also open the counterplay potential of BeanSoldier being able to drop a Whale after the fact and clean up that Cryovern at a 4/7 stat line, as we've seen in previous rounds. But the Shield cleaning up the Cryovern and the Narpoon proceeding to clean up the Crab after the fact makes it kind of easy. BeanSoldier is going to then go and develop a Dratagua going into his turn here, and is going to get back 2 of those Water Spirits. Absolutely critical for this particular deck, but really no offensive pressure being placed by BeanSoldier at this stage, as he is going to just pass back to SunseedJess.
Yeah, the Drautagua refunding part of the Shield of Achilles there is pretty big. I wonder why he did not pay off of Mustation if it was going to die to the Narpoon anyway. I think that may have been a little misstep there potentially, unless he really wanted these Water Spirits out of Spirit deck. But we know that he had plenty. So I'm very interested as to what's going on there. But Jess with a second Cryoling gonna go ahead and ascend once more from hand, meaning that all the Cryoverns are in hand at this point. And now BeanSoldier once again has to deal with a very scary threat.
But once again, that Cryovern has been misenchanted with the water, which does mean that Galaxy once again does not matter, as it is going to be Shield of Achilles back to the hand again out of BeanSoldier here. Absolutely expensive shields, but is absolutely pulling its weight here, as those Cryoverns are still kind of locked up in SunseedJess's hand at this stage. It looks like BeanSoldier is going to go for the re-enchant on the Rabbit to dig into his deck a little bit. As something he probably has to worry about is, what if SunseedJess goes and just ascends over this Narpoon into the Cryovern again? Obviously, SunseedJess doesn't have any more in deck, and thus maybe she goes Cryoling to Cryovern for a third time. But more likely here, I think this Narpoon sticking on the board might actually still be a Cryovern threatening.
And that's very much the thing that BeanSoldier has had to think about for 2 turns now. Is the Ambrosia, though, is absolutely killer, getting down very low to be able to do some of these plays, and gonna be able to heal back up to almost parity with SunseedJess here. But you're absolutely right. The Narpoon is a threat for a Hard Ascension that needs to be considered from BeanSoldier's side. And if he doesn't have back row, Hard Ascension here is going to be devastating. Thankfully for him, looks like he's got at least one back row, considering setting the second. And I imagine that's just a pass from him here.
Yeah, I imagine those back row have to, at the very least, be, one of them has to be a PTA, I'd imagine, is one of the only things I can think of that he would regularly be able to see here to answer a Cryovern. Because what are the odds here that he's found the third Shield of Achilles to deal with it?
Yeah, Gorgon's Gaze also could potentially do it, but that's only preventing a battle, so he would need to have an answer in hand. Looks like Jess is thinking very, very hard about what her options are here. Both of these casters very, very low in Spirit deck, a decent amount of cards in hand for both of them, but SunseedJess just has not seen back row. I'm very curious to the number of back row that she's running in her deck, because it just seems as though she's not been seeing all that many.
It looks like the Hard Ascension line is what is going to be gone for here, as she sends over the Narpoon into the Cryovern, as previously discussed. The question is, what is the spirit that she is going to put under that here? It looks like it's going to be a second water. So this is 2 water under Cryovern. No chance of using its effect, but I don't think Jess cares at this stage. Able to walk over the Drautagua, no response out of BeanSoldier against this Cryovern at all.
I think it's very possible that in this position, BeanSoldier just doesn't actually really care about losing the board presence of Drautagua. It's gotten its effect off, which is really all he needed to do. And the Astrabbit's the critical piece for him here, as he had healed 1 Thunderback previously, and is looking to dig deeper into his deck to get some of those key cards that he might need to handle this Cryovern. Now, there's going to be a lot of pressure next turn if Jess has another normal cast, which she likely does in hand, that does anything. This Cryovern threatens the Astrabbit, and it's water enchanted. And
there goes the Ambrosia again, paying off the bunny, maintaining those Thunder Spirits into rotation and making it to where BeanSoldier can actually stay in this game quite effectively. But I'd have to imagine the card that he's probably looking for off this bunny more than anything now is once again that Galaxy, as the Cryovern is in fact misenchanted with water, meaning it would drop low against a Galaxy. And with SunseedJess not having any kind of back row, you have to think that this has to be on BeanSoldier's mind.
Well, what I think might be on BeanSoldier's mind is using an Earthquake right here. As 2 Earth Spirits have gone back into his Spirit deck. The question is, will he rip it right out the gate here? He's looking at his runes. He passed. He's just setting up, it appeared.
And there goes the Eddie, going to put that Astrabbit to attack mode here, making that Astrabbit a much easier target to clean up. Even if BeanSoldier does in fact have something to deal with the Cryovern, he is still going to lose the rabbit here unless both of those back row are alive. They are not, by the looks of it, as he's going to take 1 damage from Cryovern running over the bunny, and a total of 2 once Eddie connects in for the damage there as well. But not even missing a beat. BeanSoldier dropping another rabbit. I believe that's the 3rd one out of BeanSoldier this game. Is that correct?
Yeah, we've seen 5 total at this point, I believe, from SunseedJess seeing 2 and BeanSoldier seeing 3 now.
Absolutely. He is the funniest of the bunnies, for sure. Once again, BeanSoldier looking for an option to hopefully try and clean up this Cryovern here. Like you said before, he did put back the 2 Earth Spirits, so I imagine Earthquake is on the mind. But unfortunately, if he doesn't clean up the Cryovern here, there's a very strong chance this rabbit, once again, does not survive the turn.
Yeah, well, there's even a threat now of Eddie becoming a Cryovern if Jess is running too, because we've only seen the one that was special cast from the first Cryo Link.
That is very true, because she did special ascend it from hand. If Jess is holding a second one, that is something to look out for here. With that in mind, but it looks like she's going to instead cast a Mustation here. We've seen Mustation out of BeanSoldier here, and now we get to see it out of Jess. It looks like she is going to expend to swap him up to a 6/1. Once again, that is 2 Elestrals threatening the bunny, and down comes the Ambrosia on top of that, and it looks like BeanSoldier is gonna scoop. Looks like, I believe, BeanSoldier will be leading us off here for this clash.
I'd be blown away if he didn't choose to go first after losing the first game here. Looks like he's considering his hand, though. Mulligans are resolved, I believe. It looks like both of these casters are keeping. And it looks like BeanSoldier running out the defensive Mustation to start. Probably just going to be setting some back row, if any, in passing. It looks like it's actually just a pass.
Oh, that seems a little rough, but also Mustation is one of those cards that can just survive the turn in defense, back row or no. Just that 6 defense is so difficult to get over, and unfortunately, it does also mean that if SunseedJess does have a Galaxy here to potentially threaten it, BeanSoldier would have the option to then expend for the Mustation effect to then swap its defense stat back to 6, even under a Galaxy.
It looked like BeanSoldier just read Mustation to SunseedJess, which to me would have indicated an Eddie play potential. However, SunseedJess is just going to run out the Frostmite, which will handle this Mustation quite easily, making
that is probably
the
most reliable. That is probably the most reliable card for handling this crap here, being able to guarantee that it goes down to some low defense value no matter what. BeanSoldier, I believe, just went for an expend to draw here as well. It's going to set one and pass it back. It's not really, that's on a very unfortunate turn of events, as that's the case here, as Frostmite is one of those cards where it's not too difficult to deal with it, but you absolutely want to deal with it before it kind of snowballs into a problem. And down comes the funny bunny, the Astrabbit out of SunseedJess. Once again, she's getting to look at the top 3 of her deck and pick one to keep. This rabbit from both sides has been just putting in absolute work this match.
I think if you're BeanSoldier here, despite the fact that your opponent has 2 Elestrals on board now, whatever, I don't think he feels too bad about going expended draw here. I'm going to imagine he has a Resting or a Lavalith here, or an Eddie, which will deal a lot here with this Astrabbit. The question actually at this point is SunseedJess's back row live? And how live is it? And BeanSoldier setting 3 back row here, up to 4 now, is absurd.
Yeah, absolutely. BeanSoldier setting the fort is terrifying. He is going to be able to walk over this bunny. Frostmite kind of defending the fortress by itself here, which it looks like SunseedJess is still going to declare the usage of the Frostmite here. That's going to drop Eddie to a 4-0. Not really too sure how much that matters in this scenario, as the one major situation where that could matter would be something like either a Galaxy coming down, which you'd still be able to walk over the Eddie at 1 attack, or for a Cryoblast, which again, Eddie already would go down a Cryoblast prior to that.
Well, you know, no reason not to declare the effect. There's no other Elestrals that are hitting the board this turn anyway, so might not be a little silly and go ahead and activate Frostmite as a little treat.
That's absolutely completely fair. The question here is SunseedJess going to go for another Elestral development? And it looks like she is going to develop the second Astrabbit in attack this time. Once again, getting to look at the top 3 of her deck. These bunnies, this is the 7th bunny cast that we have seen this match. And gotta say, these bunnies seem to be absolutely determining the pace of these games.
I get it. I have also been on the receiving end of SunseedJess using Rabbit 7 times in a game, but it looks like Earthquake's coming out from SunseedJess here to go ahead and take out that Eddie, and now this is 2 damage to pressure for free.
Yes, but also you have to keep in mind, using an Earthquake on the Eddie this early seems a little bit on the riskier side of things. BeanSoldier, though, notably just expended Fire, so that kind of tells us that he does not have Lavalith in the grip. Means that probably looking at having to make some kind of a more aggressive play here, but also keep in mind with Astrabbit up like this, it kind of telegraphs to me that SunseedJess might have a Tsunami in the back row to play defensive. But down comes the Foamy. That is absolutely a way to get aggressive here. If Foamy crashing with Astrabbit can lead to an absolutely devastating board swing in tempo here for BeanSoldier.
Yeah, going Foamy, Crash, Astrabbit, special cast Eddie in defense, swap itself to attack, could be killer here. However, if either of those back row are Gorgon's Gaze, that instantly kind of kills the momentum here. It looks like the Crash will go through.
Ooh.
Foamy will resolve. The question is, are we going for that Fabled Eddie in defense swap to attack move? Or is there something else in play?
Absolutely.
And there is an Eddie on board.
You have to imagine, though, if
SunseedJess...
I was going to say, you have to imagine if SunseedJess has that PTA in the back row, you might want to consider it here just because Frostmite can't get run over by the 2-attack Eddie. And that's exactly what's coming down out of SunseedJess, PTAing the Eddie as it comes down. So even though it swaps up to attack, it is still a 2-1 and cannot get over this Frostmite before PTA is going to inevitably take that Eddie off the board.
There's definitely a consideration here to declare and then go Tsunami from BeanSoldier, but it looks like he doesn't have anything, and SunseedJess is going to expend a pop in 10 phase.
Absolutely. But once again, Sunseed is playing into 4 back row from BeanSoldier. You have to imagine that at least one of those is live right now. Down comes the Elechick out of Sunseed. As we saw in her previous game, that's definitely going to go and grab a Zeus out of deck. Absolutely is exactly what happens here, but no Gorgons out of BeanSoldier, no PTA out of BeanSoldier. It does mean that this Elechick is most likely going to stick overall. We're probably looking at either 2 damage here or a Tsunami to potentially get defensive. But as you said before, if he had Tsunami, realistically, he would have played it already. As those 2 connect, BeanSoldier, I believe, going down to 10 spirits in Spirit deck. This is starting to look a little bit suspect.
Yeah, I think if you're BeanSoldier, you still don't feel too bad because you can put up pretty reasonable pressure. And Jess has been pretty light on back row so far. And so you can run her through her resources. Eventually you'll be able to get through, all that she has going on and start to really put on some pressure. And it looks like that's what's happening. This Eddie takes out the Elechick. And now SunseedJess is left to try and out this Eddie with 4 back row. Zeus in hand. I don't believe enough Frost and Underworld for a Cryoling Ascension. We'll see. She's considering an Elestral here. What possibly she could be going for. It's a Narpoon.
And that Narpoon, even though it would crash, will contest the Eddie overall. But more importantly, probably for SunseedJess here, is going to probably be able to grab that Cryoling out of the deck and put it in the hand. That's exactly what she's going for here. And that's going to make it to where Cryovern is now a legitimate threat that just has to be considered moving forward. And I imagine SunseedJess is probably even considering taking the Narpoon Crash here. Doesn't seem like it would be too bad of a call for her to make, as she would hold the Elestral's advantage on the board. But the question there is, if that is what she's looking at, does she have any more back row to put into it? She's going to go Zeus, actually. So the Crash isn't even a consideration. I completely forget that she did add Zeus up with the Elechick. So now both of these Elestrals can swing over the Eddy, and it's all down to how much does BeanSoldier want to commit to stop this, or is he just going to let it go through?
Yeah, and really, how much do you care about an Eddy? I love Eddy. I love Ed and Edward, but I don't think that it's worth a back row here, especially when that Cryovern is on the horizon. But also going down to 8 Spirit and Spirit deck feels pretty rough here. Almost mandates an Ambrosia, but instead he's going to expend a draw.
Looks like the wheels might be falling off just a little bit here for BeanSoldier. That expend a draw kind of does telegraph that he doesn't really have a way to answer this board. And another Narpoon coming down does mean that SunseedJess is just going to keep searching for those 1-drop Frost Elestrals. So even if this board gets answered, she still has more options. And there is the Cryoling out of deck, meaning she now has 2 Cryolings in hand. You have to imagine that things are not looking too good for BeanSoldier here, especially because Tsunami can't even block this massive onslaught of damage coming through, as 2 of the 3 Elestrals are water enchanted.
Yeah, I think at this point, if you're BeanSoldier, you're doing your best to not get frustrated by this turn of events and just relax in the knowledge that you should top regardless. And you can use this.
The
hands are shown. Looks like BeanSoldier did not draw any Elestrals. That is like 9 cards between hand and field. He did side into the Argo, but he just did not see a single Elestral.
And notably, he did have the Ambrosia in hand, but like you said, with no Elestrals to follow up, Ambrosia really is just a delaying of the inevitable there.